The stars disappeared first. People across Earth looked up at the night sky and saw darkness where constellations had shined for thousands of years. Then the ships revealed themselves. 500 massive warships materialized above the planet, each one larger than any city humanity had ever built. Their hulls gleamed with strange metals that seemed to absorb light, and energy shields shimmered around them like heat waves on a summer road. In homes, offices, and streets around the world, every screen suddenly activated. Televisions turned on by themselves. Phones blazed with light. Giant displays in city centers flickered to life. A face appeared on all of them simultaneously. It was humanoid but not human. The skin was pale blue, the eyes were too large and completely black, and the head was crowned with what looked like crystal formations growing from the skull. "Humans of Earth," the being said. Its voice translated instantly into every language. "I am Emperor Tharnvik of the Velkari Empire. We have conquered 47 star systems. Your world is now surrounded by our fleet. You have 48 hours to surrender completely. Dismantle all weapons. Submit to Imperial rule. Prepare your population for service to the Empire. If you refuse, we will reduce your cities to ash and take what remains by force. This is your only warning." The image vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. For a moment, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Then chaos erupted. People ran through streets screaming. Stock markets crashed within minutes. Religious leaders called for prayer. Scientists checked and rechecked their instruments, hoping this was somehow a hoax. But the massive ships hanging in orbit were very real. The United Earth Defense Council convened within an hour. Representatives from every nation crowded into the emergency bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. The room was designed to survive nuclear war, but no one knew if it could withstand alien weapons. The president of the council, an elderly diplomat named Ambassador Park, called the meeting to order with shaking hands. "We have less than 2 days," he said. "What are our options?" The defense ministers spoke first. The Russian representative pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's military capabilities compared to the alien fleet. The numbers were devastating. Earth had 3 orbital defense platforms, 200 fighter craft capable of space combat and various missile systems. The alien fleet could probably destroy all of it in minutes. "We have to surrender," the French defense minister said quietly. "Look at those ships. Look at the power readings our satellites are detecting. They could glass the entire planet before we fired a single shot." Others agreed. The British representative suggested negotiating terms. The Chinese minister proposed offering resources in exchange for autonomy. The Indian delegate recommended evacuating as many people as possible to underground shelters. Each plan was more desperate than the last. General Park Hana sat at the far end of the table, listening. She was 52 years old with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was crisp and unadorned except for a single medal from the Unification Wars. She had been silent for the entire meeting, her dark eyes watching the holographic displays with an expression that revealed nothing. "General Park," Ambassador Park said, recognizing they shared a surname but no relation. "You command our orbital defense grid. What is your assessment?" Park Hana stood slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She had a reputation for being cold, calculating, and brutally honest. She had risen through the ranks by being right more often than anyone else, even when her assessments were unwelcome. "They made a mistake," she said simply. The room erupted in protests. The American Defense Secretary stood up. "A mistake? General, they have 500 warships. We have nothing that can touch them." "They made a mistake by giving us 48 hours, Park continued calmly. "If they wanted to conquer Earth, they should have attacked immediately. The fact that they're giving us time means they're following some protocol. They're arrogant. They think we're primitive and harmless." "We are harmless against them," the German minister said. "Those ships are using technology we barely understand." Park Hana walked to the holographic display. She manipulated the controls, bringing up images of the alien ships from every angle. Earth satellites had been scanning them since they arrived. 20 years ago, she said, we found a derelict ship near Neptune. Everyone in this room knows about it. We recovered data cores containing information about dozens of alien civilizations. I was part of the team that decoded them. I spent 2 decades studying how these species fight wars. The Velkari follow traditional patterns. They use overwhelming force and expect their enemies to break immediately. They've never faced an enemy that fought smart instead of hard. The room was silent now. Even the skeptics were listening. "I request permission to send a response to Emperor Tharnvik," Park said. "What kind of response?" Ambassador Park asked carefully. "A short one." The council debated for an hour. Some argued that provoking the aliens would doom them all. Others insisted that humanity should face extinction with dignity rather than kneeling. Eventually, they voted. The decision was split, but Park Hana got her permission by a single vote. She recorded the message herself, standing alone in a broadcast room. The camera showed only her face, stern and unwavering. "Emperor Tharnvik, this is General Park Hana of the United Earth Defense Force. You've made a miscalculation. You won't last 2 seconds against humanity. We'll see you in 48 hours. The message was transmitted directly to the flagship. Within minutes, Earth's listening stations picked up the response from the alien fleet. Laughter. The Velkari commanders were actually laughing. Intelligence officers translated the intercepted communications. The aliens were calling humans amusing and brave for primitives. Emperor Tharnvik ordered his fleet to prepare for planetary bombardment once the deadline expired. He wanted to make an example of Earth's defiance. But while the aliens laughed, General Park Hana activated Protocol Jericho. It was a contingency plan she had been developing for 15 years, updated constantly as Earth's technology improved. Within minutes of sending her message, encrypted orders went out to military bases across the planet and throughout the solar system. On the moon, Colonel Kim Doyen received his orders and immediately began prepping his fast strike wing. Every pilot was recalled to their ships. Weapons were loaded, and engines were brought to full power. At the Orbital Research Station, Captain Choi Minji gathered her team from the Quantum Tactics Division. They had been running simulations for years, waiting for this exact scenario. Now it was real. Deep in the Antarctic ice, Dr. Lee Hyun activated the secret shipyards where humanity's newest vessels waited in hidden berths. These ships had been built over 2 decades using technology reverse-engineered from alien designs and improved with human innovation. Across Earth and its colonies, thousands of soldiers, pilots, engineers, and scientists moved into position. The countdown had begun. Humanity had 48 hours to prepare for a battle that would decide the fate of their species. And General Park Hana had just declared they would win it in 2 seconds. The Velkari Empire had conquered 47 worlds. They were about to learn why humanity would never be the 48th, 20 years earlier. A research vessel named Discovery was conducting routine scans near Neptune when its sensors detected something impossible. An object the size of a skyscraper was drifting in the outer solar system, its surface reflecting no light. When the crew investigated, they found a ship. It was alien, ancient, and completely dead. There were no bodies aboard, no signs of what had killed the crew. But there were computers, still functioning after unknown centuries in the void. Lieutenant Park Hana was 28 at the time, a junior tactical officer assigned to the recovery mission. She watched as engineers carefully extracted the ship's data cores and brought them back to Earth. She was one of 50 people cleared to see what they contained. What she saw changed her life forever. The data cores held information about the galaxy beyond Earth's small corner of space. There were maps showing hundreds of civilizations scattered among the stars. There were descriptions of technologies that seemed like magic. And there were military records detailing how these civilizations fought their wars. Park spent 3 years doing nothing but studying those records. She learned about the Velkari Empire and their traditional battle formations. She learned about the Thorn Collective and their hive mind tactics. She learned about dozens of species, their strengths and their weaknesses. Most importantly, she learned that almost every spacefaring civilization followed rigid patterns. They had traditions, protocols, and established doctrines that rarely changed. War in space had become predictable. Empires conquered worlds using the same strategies they had used for thousands of years because those strategies always worked against other traditional forces. Park realized humanity had an advantage. They were new. They had no traditions to follow. They could be unpredictable. She wrote a report that was classified immediately. In it, she argued that Earth should prepare for eventual contact with hostile aliens by developing weapons and strategies specifically designed to counter traditional space warfare. Her superiors thought she was paranoid, but a few of them thought she might be right. They gave her a small budget and told her to build a defense program in secret. For 20 years, Park built that program. She recruited the brightest minds on Earth, people who could think differently. Dr. Lee Hyun was one of the first. He was a quantum physicist who had radical theories about faster-than-light travel. Most scientists dismissed his ideas as impossible. Park gave him funding and a laboratory hidden inside an asteroid. Hyun spent 15 years developing what he called skip drives. They couldn't make a ship travel between star systems, but they could make a ship vanish from one point in local space and reappear at another point instantly. The range was limited to a few thousand kilometers, but in the middle of a battle, that was enough. A ship could be behind an enemy 1 second and next to them the next, too close for their weapons to track. Engineer Yoon Sora joined the program 8 years ago. She was a weapons designer who specialized in kinetic systems. While other nations were trying to copy alien energy weapons, Sora went the opposite direction. She developed rail cannons that fired solid projectile rounds at incredible speeds. The rounds were tipped with exotic materials that created resonance patterns and energy shields, weakening them with each hit. The weapons were simple, reliable, and devastating against shields designed to stop energy beams. The program grew slowly, carefully. Park recruited soldiers who could think creatively under pressure. She established secret bases on the Moon, Mars, and in the asteroid belt. She oversaw the construction of strike craft that looked primitive, but incorporated technology decades ahead of anything publicly known. Everything was hidden behind cover projects and false budget reports. The world's governments knew Park was working on defense research, but only a handful of people knew what she was really building. When the Valkyrie fleet appeared above Earth, Park had 3,000 strike craft ready, 12 heavy cruisers equipped with skip drives and adaptive shields, and tens of thousands of trained personnel who had been preparing for this moment. She also had something more valuable than any weapon. She had studied the Valkyrie for 2 decades. She knew exactly how they would attack. The intelligence network confirmed her predictions. Intercepted alien communications showed the Valkyrie were following their standard conquest protocol. They would wait for the deadline, make a demonstration attack to break human morale, then demand surrender again. If humans still refused, they would bombard the planet until resistance was impossible. The Emperor's commanders were already discussing which cities to target first. They talked about humans the way hunters talked about prey. In the war room beneath Colorado Mountain, Park gathered her core team. Colonel Kim Do-yeon had just arrived from the lunar base. He was a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, known for staying calm in any crisis. Captain Choi Minji was there, her fingers dancing over holographic displays as she ran final checks on the quantum communication network. Dr. Lee Hyun attended via secure video link from his laboratory. Yoon Sora was physically present, looking nervous but determined. "They think we're primitives," Park told her team. "They've looked at our public military and dismissed us as harmless. They have no idea what we've been building. That's our advantage." She pulled up a holographic display of the Valkyrie fleet. The ships were arranged in their traditional formation, a sphere with capital ships at the core and smaller vessels forming protective layers. It was a formation designed for overwhelming firepower and maximum shield coverage. It had conquered 47 worlds. "This formation has one weakness," Park said, highlighting the center of the sphere. "The command ships are at the core, protected by layers of other vessels. They expect enemies to attack from outside, trying to break through the defensive layers. They've never faced an enemy that could appear inside the formation." Kim Do-yeon understood immediately. "The skip drives. We jump straight into the middle of their fleet." "Exactly," Park confirmed. "We let them commit to their bombardment pattern. All their ships will be focused on Earth, shields oriented downward, engines maintaining stable orbit. Then we strike from inside, 3,000 strike craft appearing simultaneously among their capital ships. They'll have seconds to react, and their formation will work against them. They won't be able to fire without hitting their own vessels." Choi Minji added the next phase to the display. "While their fleet is in chaos, we target their command structure. We know which ships hold their admirals from the intelligence we've gathered. We take out their leadership first." "And if they try to retreat?" Yoon Sora asked. "We've already positioned quantum mines along their likely escape vectors," Hyun said from the screen. "Based on their standard tactics, we can predict where they'll go. The mines are invisible to their sensors and will activate when their ships pass through." Park looked at each of them. "This plan requires perfect timing. If we strike too early, they'll have time to adapt. Too late, and they might damage Earth before we can stop them. We wait for them to commit completely, then we end this fast. The team spent hours reviewing every detail. They knew the stakes. If the plan failed, Earth would burn. But they also knew they had advantages the aliens didn't expect. Humanity had been preparing for this fight for 20 years, while the Velkari assumed they were facing primitives with crude weapons. Kim Doyen left the meeting to brief his pilots. They were young, most of them, trained in secret facilities across the solar system. They knew their strike craft were equipped with technology the public didn't know existed. They knew they would be outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew they had something the aliens lacked. They had the element of surprise and the will to defend their home. Choi Minji returned to her station to finalize the quantum jamming network. Once the battle started, the Velkari fleet would lose their communication advantage. Their ships would be isolated, unable to coordinate effectively. It would turn their organized fleet into hundreds of individual vessels all fighting separate battles. Park Hana stood alone in the war room after the others left, looking at the holographic display of Earth. The planet looked so small compared to the alien fleet above it. But she had learned long ago that size wasn't everything in warfare. Intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to fight in unexpected ways could overcome raw power. She thought about the lieutenant she had been 20 years ago, reading those alien data cores for the first time. That young officer had been terrified by what she learned about the hostile galaxy beyond Earth. But she had also seen an opportunity. The galaxy's great empires had grown comfortable with their power. They had forgotten how dangerous a cornered enemy could be, especially one with nothing to lose. The countdown continued. 24 hours remained until the deadline. High above, the Velkari fleet maintained its position, confident and unconcerned. They had no idea that far below, humanity was preparing to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The final seconds of the deadline ticked away in complete silence. Across Earth, billions of people watched their screens, waiting. In shelters, homes, and bunkers, families held each other tight. Religious leaders offered prayers in temples, churches, and mosques. Scientists in laboratories stopped their work to stare at the sky through reinforced windows. The whole world held its breath. Above the planet, Emperor Tharnvik sat on his command throne aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. The bridge was massive, filled with holographic displays showing every ship in his fleet. Officers moved efficiently between stations, confident in their superiority. The Emperor himself appeared relaxed, almost bored. He had given this same ultimatum to 47 worlds before Earth. Most had surrendered before the deadline. The few that resisted were crushed quickly. Time has expired, his tactical officer announced. No response from the human government. Commander Zelf, the fleet's military advisor, stood beside the Emperor's throne. They're likely paralyzed with fear. I recommend a demonstration strike. Destroy one city to show them we're serious. They'll surrender immediately. The Emperor considered this. Which city does their general command from? She operates from a facility in their North American continent, but she travels frequently. Our intelligence suggests she's currently at their council headquarters in Europe. No, Tharnvik decided. We destroy a different city. Let her watch. Let her understand the cost of her defiance. Target their Asian commercial center, the one they call Hong Kong. Orders flowed through the fleet. The capital ships in the center of the formation rotated slightly, bringing their primary weapons to bear on the planet below. Energy conduits throughout the massive vessels glowed brighter as power built up. 50 ships prepared to fire simultaneously, focusing their particle beams on a single target. The combined blast would vaporize the entire city in seconds. In the war room deep beneath the Alps, General Park Hana watched the energy readings spike on her displays. Every ship in the alien fleet was committing to the attack pattern, exactly as she had predicted. Their shields were oriented downward toward the planet. Their engines maintained stable orbit positions. Their weapons were charging for maximum impact. They're committed, Colonel Kim Doyen reported from the Luna base. His voice came through perfectly clear on the quantum. Communication network. All strike craft are ready. Pilots report green across the board. Jamming network is active and standing by, Captain Choi Minji confirmed from her station. On your mark, we'll cut their communications. Park looked at the countdown clock. The alien weapons would reach full charge in 30 seconds. It was time. She keyed her command channel so every human pilot, every ship captain, Every soldier in the defense network could hear her. This is General Park. 20 years ago, we found evidence that hostile aliens existed in our galaxy. We prepared for this day. We built weapons they don't expect. We trained for tactics they've never seen. The enemy thinks we're primitive and weak. They're about to learn they're wrong. All units execute Protocol Jericho. Show them what humanity can do. She pressed the authorization key. Now, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, Captain Choi activated the quantum jamming network. Every Valkyrie ship suddenly lost contact with the others. Their communication channels filled with white noise and interference. The carefully coordinated fleet became hundreds of isolated vessels. Second, Earth's planetary defense grid activated. Hidden generators across the planet created a massive ionization field in the upper atmosphere. When the alien particle beams fired, they struck this field and dispersed harmlessly, absorbed by the same technology humans had adapted from the ancient derelict ship. Third, 3,000 human strikecraft jumped. One moment, the Valkyrie fleet floated in perfect formation, confident and untouchable. The next moment, small human ships materialized inside their defensive sphere, appearing out of nowhere among the capital ships. The aliens had been scanning the planet below and their outer perimeter. They never expected an attack to come from inside their own formation. Chaos erupted instantly. Valkyrie crews panicked, their sensors screaming warnings about hostile contacts at point-blank range. The human strikecraft were tiny compared to the massive alien vessels, but that was their strength. They were too small for the capital ship's main weapons to track effectively. They were too close, scattered throughout the formation where firing at them meant risking friendly fire, and they were incredibly fast. The skip drives let them blink in and out of position, appearing next to a target firing their rail cannons, then vanishing before return fire could hit them. The Valkyrie shields, designed to stop energy weapons, struggled against solid projectile rounds traveling at hypersonic speeds. Yunsora's exotic alloys created resonance patterns that weakened the shields with each impact. Lieutenant Shin Jae piloted Strikecraft Delta 7, his hands steady on the controls despite his pounding heart. This was his first real combat, and it was nothing like the simulations. The Valkyrie capital ship in front of him was so massive it filled his entire viewport. He could see its shield generators glowing bright blue along the hull. Delta 7 engaging, he reported calmly. He fired a burst from his rail cannon, targeting the generator cluster. The rounds hit with precision, each impact creating visible ripples in the shield. The 4th round punched through, destroying the generator in a cascade of sparks and explosions. Generator down, his weapons officer confirmed. Nice shooting. Around them, thousands of similar engagements played out. Human pilots worked in coordinated pairs, one attacking while the other covered. They targeted specific systems, shield generators first, then weapon arrays, then engine clusters. They weren't trying to destroy the massive ships, that would take too long. They were crippling them, taking away their ability to fight back. On the Eternal Dominion's bridge, Commander Zelf stared at his displays in disbelief. Red warning indicators covered every screen. Ships throughout the fleet were reporting damage, requesting assistance, calling for reinforcements. But there were no reinforcements. Every ship was under attack. How did they get inside our formation? An officer shouted. They can teleport, another replied, his voice shaking. Their ships are jumping in and out of position. We can't track them. Get me tactical data, Zelf ordered, trying to restore control. I need to know their numbers, their capabilities. But the quantum jamming was too effective. His fleet couldn't coordinate. Each ship fought independently, using their own sensors and making their own decisions. The formation that had been their strength now trapped them. Ships couldn't fire at the human craft without risking hitting their own allies. Emperor Tharnvik remained on his throne, but his calm demeanor had cracked. His empire had conquered 47 worlds using these exact tactics. The formation had never failed. He watched as one of his cruisers exploded, its reactor breached by repeated rail cannon fire. Pull back, he ordered. Reform at high orbit. But as his ships tried to retreat, they triggered the second part of humanity's trap. The quantum mines Dr. Lee Hyun had positioned months ago, activated as Valkyrie vessels entered the predicted escape vectors. The mines created localized electromagnetic pulses that cascaded through ship shields, causing reactor instabilities and system failures. Ships that tried to flee found themselves dead in space, systems offline, at the mercy of pursuing human craft. Colonel Kim Doyen led his Luna Wing into the next phase of the attack. These were humanity's best pilots flying the fastest ships. Their mission was surgical: eliminate the command vessels. Years of intelligence work had identified which ships held the Velkari admirals and senior commanders. Luna Wing, this is lead, Doyen transmitted. Primary targets are marked on your displays. We skip in pairs, synchronize strikes on bridge sections. No second chances, make every shot count. His ship vanished and reappeared next to a Velkari command cruiser. His weapons officer had already locked onto the bridge section, and the rail cannon fired the instant they materialized. The round pierced the ship's armor and detonated inside the bridge. Atmosphere vented into space in a white cloud of frozen gas. Across the battlefield, Luna Wing executed similar strikes. 7 command ships were crippled in 90 seconds. Without their admirals to coordinate responses, the Velkari fleet's cohesion collapsed completely. Individual captains made different decisions, some trying to fight, others attempting to flee, still others holding position and hoping for orders that would never come. Lieutenant Shin Jae's craft took fire from a Velkari destroyer. His shields held, but the impact threw his ship into a violent spin. He fought the controls, trying to regain stability. Delta 7, you're venting atmosphere, his weapons officer warned. Hull breach in Section 4. I can compensate, Shin replied, but then his engines flickered. A second hit from the destroyer found his drive systems. Red warnings lit up his console. Negative. Engines are gone. I'm drifting. Around him the battle raged. Human ships darted between dying Velkari vessels. Explosions bloomed in the darkness. And the massive enemy fleet that had seemed invincible was being torn apart by ships a fraction of their size. General Park watched the tactical displays in the war room. The attack had been underway for 9 minutes. 9 minutes against an empire that thought they would win in hours. The Velkari fleet had lost 40% of its capital ships. Their formation was destroyed. Their command structure was shattered, and humanity's forces had barely begun to show what they were capable of. All units maintain pressure, Park ordered. Don't let them regroup. This ends now. Emperor Tharnvik had lived for over 1,000 years. He had commanded fleets in dozens of wars. He had watched civilizations kneel before his power. But he had never experienced what was happening now. His fleet, the pride of the Velkari Empire, was being torn apart by primitives who shouldn't even have faster-than-light technology. Status report, he demanded, his voice tight with controlled rage. Commander Zelf looked up from his console, his face pale. 240 ships have been destroyed or disabled. Another 100 have suffered critical damage. Our command structure is fractured. We've lost contact with Admiral Krenor's battle group entirely. They're dead, Tharnvik said flatly. What about their forces? Minimal casualties. Maybe 300 of their strike craft destroyed out of thousands. They're too fast, too unpredictable. Our weapons can't track them effectively. Zelf hesitated. My Emperor, I recommend full retreat. We need to regroup beyond the system, analyze their tactics, and return with appropriate countermeasures. No. Tharnvik stood from his throne. In his 1,000 years, he had never retreated from battle. His pride would not allow it, and more importantly, his empire could not afford to show weakness. If word spread that the Velkari had been defeated by a primitive species, the Empire's other conquered worlds might rebel. Activate the Imperial Guard. Every officer on the bridge turned to look at him. Commander Zelf's eyes widened. My Emperor, the Guard is our last reserve. If we commit them here and they fail, we'll have nothing left to protect the core worlds. They won't fail, Tharnvik said with absolute certainty. The Imperial Guard has never been defeated. Activate them now. Deep within the center of the Velkari formation, 50 ships that had remained hidden throughout the battle suddenly powered up. These were the dreadnoughts of the Imperial Guard, vessels reserved only for the Emperor's direct command. Each one was crewed by warriors who had trained their entire lives for combat. Each ship was enhanced with exotic matter cores that provided power far beyond standard vessels. They were faster, stronger, and more heavily armed than anything else in the fleet. The guard ships broke formation and accelerated toward the human strike craft. Their movements were precise and coordinated, not like the panicked responses of the regular fleet. They worked in perfect squadrons, covering each other with interlocking fields of fire. When they engaged the human craft, the difference was immediately apparent. A squadron of human strike craft attacking a damaged cruiser suddenly found themselves under fire from 3 guard dreadnoughts. The guards' weapons tracked the small ships with terrifying accuracy. 2 human craft exploded before they could react. A third tried to skip away, but the dreadnoughts predicted the jump and fired into the space where it materialized. The strike craft died instantly. In the war room, General Park saw the tactical situation change. Red indicators appeared on her display as human casualties suddenly spiked. The Imperial Guard was a new factor, one she had anticipated but hoped to avoid. The guard ships were significantly more dangerous than the regular fleet. She opened a priority channel. Commander Kang Ji-won, you're active. Deploy Titan Squadron. Far beyond the orbit of Mars, in a hidden facility carved into a massive asteroid, 12 ships had been waiting. They were unlike anything else in humanity's arsenal. Each one was 2 kilometers long, built in secret over 15 years using technology from multiple alien species that humans had adapted and improved. They were humanity's answer to the question of how to fight capital ships on equal terms. Commander Kang Ji-won was 60 years old, a veteran of more conflicts than most people knew existed. He had been fighting since he was 17, and his scarred hands moved across the controls of his ship with practiced ease. Behind him, 11 other captains commanded their own vessels. Titan Squadron, this is lead, Ji-won transmitted. Target packages are designated. We're going in heavy. Remember your training and watch your spacing. Let's show these invaders what real warships look like. The 12 Titan-class cruisers skipped into the battle space, appearing in a perfect formation between the Imperial Guard and the human strike craft. The Valkyrie dreadnoughts immediately opened fire, but their beams struck adaptive shielding that shifted frequencies faster than the enemy could compensate. The Titans' shields held, then the Titans fired back. Their weapons combined human rail cannon technology with alien power systems. The result was devastating. Solid rounds traveling at near light speed struck the guard dreadnoughts with incredible force. Shields collapsed under the impacts. Armor crumpled. One dreadnought's reactor breached, creating a brief new sun in the darkness of space. Lieutenant Shin Jae was still alive, barely. His crippled strike craft was drifting through the debris field, systems failing one by one. His weapons officer had been knocked unconscious by the violent impacts. Life support was critical. He knew he was probably going to die here, far from home. Then he saw the Valkyrie carrier ahead of him, its massive hangar bay open as it tried to launch more fighters. And he saw that his drifting trajectory would take him directly toward that opening. His weapons were gone, his shields were dead, but his reactor still had power. If I'm going down, he whispered to himself, I'm taking them with me. He used his maneuvering thrusters to adjust his trajectory slightly, aiming for the center of the hangar bay. The carrier's point defense systems fired at him, but they were designed to stop missiles, not ships. He was too close and moving too fast. He crashed through the atmospheric shield and into the hangar. For a moment, Shin thought his reactor would fail to breach. Then he hit the emergency override, forcing the reactor into critical overload. He had just enough time to hit the ejection system before his ship exploded. The blast tore through the carrier's interior, igniting fuel stores and ammunition. Secondary explosions rippled along the massive vessel. Within seconds, the carrier began breaking apart. Shin's escape pod tumbled through space, and he watched the carrier die. His sacrifice had taken one of the largest ships in the enemy fleet out of the battle. He hoped someone would find his pod before his air ran out. Captain Choi Minji had been monitoring the battle from her station, managing the quantum jamming network and coordinating communications. But now she activated the final phase of her division's plan, psychological warfare. The Valkyrie fleet had already been shattered tactically. Now it was time to break them mentally. Her team transmitted broadcasts throughout the enemy fleet, exploiting gaps in the jamming to send targeted messages. The broadcast showed real-time casualty counts, footage of destroyed Valkyrie ships, and calculated odds of survival. But more importantly, they showed the faces of captured Valkyrie crew members who had abandoned ship. These prisoners spoke on camera about the overwhelming human forces, the impossibility of victory, the wisdom of surrender. It was all carefully designed psychological manipulation. Most Valkyrie commanders had never experienced a losing battle. They had no frame of reference for how to respond to defeat. The broadcasts fed their fear and uncertainty, making the situation seem even worse than it was. On dozens of Valkyrie ships, captains who had been fighting desperately suddenly stopped. They saw the casualty numbers. They saw their odds of survival dropping to single digits. They heard their own people advising surrender. And they made the calculation that retreat was more sensible than death. Ships began disengaging from the battle, their captains making independent decisions to flee. The Valkyrie fleet, already fractured, began to collapse completely. Even the Imperial Guard found themselves fighting alone as support vessels abandoned the battle. Commander Kang Ji-won's Titan squadron pressed their advantage, focusing fire on the Guard dreadnoughts. The fighting was brutal and close range. The Guard warriors were skilled and fearless, but they were also outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, the elite vessels were destroyed or disabled. In 13 minutes of combat, the tide had turned completely. The Valkyrie fleet that arrived with 500 ships was reduced to fewer than 300 combat-capable vessels. Of those, nearly half were trying to retreat. The legendary Imperial Guard had been decimated, and humanity's forces continued to press the attack without mercy. General Park Hana allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The battle wasn't over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Valkyrie Empire had come to conquer Earth with overwhelming force and absolute confidence. Instead, they had been shattered by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The galaxy would remember this battle. Humanity had announced its presence in the harshest terms possible, but then her sensors detected something that made her blood run cold. The Valkyrie flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was changing course. It wasn't retreating with the others. It was accelerating directly toward Earth on a collision course. Emperor Tharnvik was making a final desperate move, and if he succeeded, billions would die regardless of the military victory. Park's hands moved across her console. All units, priority target. The flagship is making a suicide run. Stop it at all costs. The Eternal Dominion was massive, larger than any human city. Its engines burned with furious intensity as it accelerated toward Earth. Emperor Tharnvik stood alone on his bridge, most of his crew having fled in escape pods when he announced his intentions. Only a handful of loyal officers remained at their stations, dedicated to their emperor even unto death. "If I cannot conquer this world," Tharnvik said quietly, "then no one will have it. Let them remember that defying the Valkyrie Empire brings only destruction." Commander Zelf was gone, evacuated against his will on the Emperor's orders. The ship's weapons were offline, shields were failing, but none of that mattered. The flagship's mass alone would be enough. When it struck Earth's surface, the impact would be equivalent to a massive asteroid collision. Cities would be obliterated. The atmosphere would ignite. Billions would die in the fires and the nuclear winter that followed. General Park Hana watched the flagship's trajectory with growing dread. Her strike craft swarmed around the massive vessel, firing constantly, but they were designed to disable weapons and shields, not stop a ship this large. The Titans were too far away to intercept in time. She had seconds to make a decision. "Get me a firing solution on that flagship," she ordered. "Everything we have." "General," her tactical officer said hesitantly, "our ground-based weapons might slow it down, but they won't stop it. The ship's too massive. Even if we destroy it completely, the debris will still hit Earth with catastrophic force." Park stared at the display, her mind racing through options. She had spent 20 years preparing for this battle. She had considered every scenario, planned for every contingency, but she hadn't anticipated this. An enemy willing to die just to take Earth with him. Then she made her decision. It was the kind of decision that ended careers or created legends. She opened a direct channel to her personal ship, the Indomitable, which was docked at the command station in orbit. "This is General Park. Prepare the Indomitable for immediate launch. Plot an intercept course with the enemy flagship." Her staff turned to stare at her. Colonel Oh Jinwoo, her second-in-command, understood immediately what she was planning. "General, no. The Indomitable isn't a combat vessel. It's a command ship. If you try to ram that flagship, you'll die, and it still won't be enough to stop it." "I'm not going to ram it," Park said calmly. She was already moving toward the elevator that would take her to the orbital lift. "I'm going to make the Emperor stop himself. Colonel Oh, you have command of the defense grid. Continue prosecution of remaining enemy vessels. That's an order." She left before anyone could argue further. The elevator carried her up through kilometers of reinforced rock to the surface, then into the orbital lift that would carry her to the station. During the 3-minute journey, she thought about her father. He had been an admiral in the old national navies before the unification. He taught her that sometimes the most important battles were won not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of the enemy. The Indomitable was waiting for her, crew already aboard and systems powered up. It was a beautiful ship, designed for coordination and communication rather than combat. But it was fast, and it had one critical system that most ships lacked. It had a skip drive powerful enough to make a jump at faster than light speeds, something that should be impossible within a gravity well. It was an emergency system, never tested in real conditions, designed for last resort evacuation. Park took her place in the command chair and immediately plotted a course to intercept the flagship. Get me a direct communication line to the Velkari Emperor. Override all jamming. I don't care what it takes, get me that line. Captain Choi Minji's division worked their electronic magic. Within 30 seconds, Park's face appeared on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, projected on every screen. Emperor Tharnvik looked at her with surprise and hatred. Have you come to beg for your world? He asked mockingly. No, Park replied. I've come to offer you a choice. You can continue your suicide run and die for nothing, or you can stand down and live to see another day. Tharnvik laughed, a bitter sound. Why would I choose to live in shame? My fleet is destroyed. My empire will see me as a failure. Death in battle is preferable to disgrace, is it? Park asked. She brought the Indomitable alongside the massive flagship, close enough that the two vessels' shields were almost touching. Because I have a different option for you. My ship is equipped with an experimental faster-than-light drive. If I activate it this close to your vessel, inside Earth's gravity well, the spatial distortion will create a localized singularity. Both our ships will be destroyed instantly, along with everything within 1,000 kilometers. Your death won't save face. It will just be a footnote in humanity's victory. It was partly a bluff. The singularity might not form exactly as she described, but the antimatter reserves in the Indomitable's reactor were very real. If she detonated them next to the flagship, both vessels would certainly be destroyed. The Emperor knew this too. She could see the calculation in his ancient eyes. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked certainty. Am I? Park asked. She began the activation sequence for the skip drive, and alarms immediately sounded on her bridge. Her crew looked terrified but stayed at their stations. You have 13 seconds to decide. Turn your ship around and power down, or we both die here. Choose. The seconds ticked away. 10, 9, 8. The skip drive's power core was building toward critical mass. The Indomitable began to shake from the energy buildup. On the Velkari flagship, similar alarms were sounding as their sensors detected the dangerous energy readings. 7, 6, 5. Commander Zelf's voice suddenly came through on the Velkari channel, transmitted from an escape pod. My Emperor, the battle is lost. There is no shame in tactical retreat. The Empire needs you alive to rebuild the fleet. Please power down. 4, 3, 2. Park kept her hand steady on the activation control. She met the Emperor's eyes through the holographic display. She showed no fear, no hesitation. If he didn't turn aside, she would do it. She would sacrifice herself and her crew to save Earth. 1. Emperor Tharnvik raised his hand. Stop engines. Power down all systems. The Eternal Dominion's massive engines died. The flagship continued drifting toward Earth, but slowly now, its momentum carrying it forward without additional thrust. It would be easy for tug ships to alter its course now, pushing it into a safe orbit. Park canceled the skip drive activation sequence. Her hands were shaking slightly, the only sign of the tension she'd been holding. Her crew let out collective sighs of relief. A wise choice, Park said to the Emperor. Now we can discuss terms like civilized beings. The battle was over. Around Earth, the surviving Velkari ships were either fleeing the system or powering down their weapons in surrender. Of the 500 ships that arrived, fewer than 200 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or disabled beyond repair. Humanity's casualties were significant. 647 pilots and crew lost, including brave souls like Lieutenant Shinjae, whose sacrifice had destroyed a carrier and saved countless lives. But Earth remained free. The planetary surface was unmarked. The cities were intact. Humanity had faced an empire that conquered 47 worlds, and they had won. In the days that followed, negotiations began in earnest. Emperor Tharnvik, humbled but alive, agreed to a non-aggression pact. More surprisingly, he agreed to a technology exchange. The Velkari had advanced technology, But humans had proven they could think in ways the rigid imperial military could not. Both species had something to learn from each other. General Park Hana led the human negotiation team. She met with the Emperor face-to-face in a neutral location aboard one of the orbital stations. He looked at her with a mixture of respect and resentment. "You took everything from me," he said. "My fleet, my reputation, my empire's pride?" "No," Park replied. "You took it from yourself when you underestimated us. We gave you 48 hours to reconsider. You chose war. We simply showed you the consequences of that choice." "Your general said we wouldn't last 2 seconds," one of the Velkari advisors said bitterly. "You were wrong. We lasted 13 minutes. Park allowed herself a slight smile. "I wasn't talking about the battle. I was talking about the decision. Once we committed to fighting, your defeat was decided in 2 seconds. Everything else was just execution of that decision." The treaty was signed 3 months later. The Velkari Empire would leave Earth's system and not return with hostile intent. In exchange, humanity agreed not to pursue the retreating fleet and would provide medical aid to Velkari prisoners. Technology exchanges would begin immediately, with both species sharing knowledge. But the most important outcome wasn't written in any treaty. Word spread through the galaxy about the battle above Earth. The story grew with each retelling. A primitive species that shouldn't have posed any threat had destroyed the Velkari fleet in less than an hour. They had used tactics no one had seen before, technology adapted from multiple sources, and a willingness to fight that terrified the established powers. Other empires began watching Earth carefully. Some saw a potential ally, others saw a threat. But no one called humans primitive anymore. 1 year after the battle, a memorial was unveiled at the Luna base where Colonel Kim Do-yeon's fast strike wing had launched from. It was a wall of black stone with 647 names carved into it, one for every person who died defending Earth. General Park Hana attended the ceremony, standing in the lunar dust as she read each name silently. Colonel Kim was there too, now an instructor at the academy, teaching the next generation of pilots the tactics that won the war. His daughter stood beside him, older now, proud of her father's service. A young cadet approached General Park after the ceremony. "General, did you ever think we would actually win?" Park considered the question. "I knew we could win." "That's different from knowing we would win. Victory isn't about having better weapons or bigger ships. It's about understanding your enemy, preparing properly, and having the will to do what's necessary. The Velkari came here expecting us to behave like every other species they'd conquered. We showed them that humans don't follow anyone else's rules." She looked up at the Earth hanging in the black sky above the moon, beautiful and blue and free. Humanity had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. They were no longer isolated. They were part of the galactic community now, not as subjects or victims, but as equals who had earned their place through courage and ingenuity. The Emperor had given Earth 2 days to surrender. General Park had promised he wouldn't last 2 seconds. In the end, both were proven right. The Emperor underestimated humanity's preparation, and humanity demonstrated that victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the smartest and most determined. The galaxy would never forget the day Earth said no. And from that day forward, humanity moved through the stars as a free people, respected and feared, ready to defend their freedom against any threat. The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity among the stars had begun.